Absolute Radio Stories, the real history of real music.
Absolute Radio Stories presents Pet Shop Boys, a celebration with Matt Lucas.
Mercurial, trailblazing, cutting edge, record-breaking, ever-evolving, forever enduring. These are all words, adjectives, cliches even, that one could use to describe Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe, a duo who met in 1981 and over 4 decades later continue to sell out arenas, headline festivals, garner critical acclaim and win over new fans as the Pet Shop Boys. Over the next hour, we'll be hearing from fans of the band, artists who have been inspired by them, and musicians who have had the pleasure of working with the pair to pay tribute to the incredible mark that the Pet Shop Boys have left on British music and culture. We'll also be hearing from Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe themselves as they discuss their 40 years together. I'm Matt Lucas, and this is the Pet Shop Boys, a celebration on Absolute Radio. Part 1. The year 3000 may still come to pass, but the music shall last. I can hear it on a timeless wavelength, never dissipating, but giving us strength. It's All Right, 1988.
My name is Skin from the rock band Skunk Anansie and also Absolute Radio host and presenter. I first heard the Pet Shop Boys very kind of early on, I would say, just because I was a dirty little raver and the best clubs in those times were all the kind of crazy gay clubs. So I would sneak out at night and just go clubbing. And so when you kind of go clubbing, that's one of the bands that people are just starting to talk about a lot.
I'm Peter Tatchell, human rights campaigner and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. I've been a fan of the Pet Shop Boys for 40 years. I love their music, and I've known Neil Tennant for much of that time as a personal friend and as a supporter of the work of my foundation. I think I first heard the Pet Shop Boys in 1984 with the release of their hit single, West End Girls. I heard it in Heaven nightclub in London, and it just got people dancing. It was a floor filler. The
very first song I remember, West End Girls, we just played that over and over and over again, because that's what we were doing, you know. It was things that we were doing, and that's why that song spoke to us so much.
My name's Bernard Butler. My relationship to the Pet Shop Boys is I'm a fan, number one. I've also had the privilege of recording with them and got to know them on a few occasions, as well as going to see them.
Sometimes you're better off dead. There's a gun in your hand that's pointing at your head. You think you're
First time I heard that record, it felt like it was something that came from absolutely nowhere and was just everywhere. The song was instantly brilliant. Everyone loved it.
in a West End town. In a West End town, a dead end world. With the East End boys and West End girls.
West End Girls doesn't sound like any other song. What is it? Is it rap? Is it a pop song? It's so catchy and it's cool and it's weird, but it's one of those songs that you listen to it today and it still has that same impact. It still sounds absolutely brilliant.
Too many shadows, whispering voices, faces on posters, too many choices. If
I'm a Londoner. At that time, going to the West End of London was about the biggest thrill you could find in London as a teenager, because there was nothing else to do, and I lived in a place just on the edge of London. The only good thing about it was that you had a train line that took 10 minutes to get to King's Cross. So you could just zip from this horrible suburban world going into town and Oxford Street and Tottenham Court Road and places like this in Soho. It was just exhilarating as a teenager.
Let's hear from the Pet Shop Boys' Neil Tennant talking about West End Girls.
Well, that song had an unusual genesis. It started off with the words. It started off as a rap. I was staying at my cousin's house and we'd watched a film on the television, like James Cagney, one of those gangster films. And this line came into my head. sometimes you're better off dead. There's a gun in your hand that's pointing at your head. And I was thinking of James Cagney. And then later on, I wrote it into sort of rap. And this was the era of Grandmaster Flash in particular, the message. And I sort of recited it to Chris, and we wrote some music. And then a while later, we wrote a very beautiful instrumental. And when I got home, I realised I could do the rap thing, but I realised you could sing the West End Girls bit when the chords changed. And this was the first track we ever recorded properly. We met this American producer, Bobby Orlando, and we went to New York. And he said, "Oh, can you start playing?" And we started playing this instrumental because we'd just written it. And I said to Chris, "Oh, you know, that rap fits with this." And we recorded the instrumental, and then Bobby said, "Okay, let's do the vocal." And so on the first version of the record, the vocal is the first time I ever sang it. And everyone in the studio in New York really, really liked it. But when we got back to London, I never played it to friends because I was embarrassed that I was rapping. And then finally a friend heard it because he made a cassette copy of the songs for us. And he said, "God, the rapping one's great." And then it was released the following year as a one-off single. And it was a huge flop. Well, we had to, of course, we remade it for the hit version with a producer called Stephen Hague. Yeah, you know, it's a one-off. I think at the time the record company thought we were going to be one-hit wonders, because how do you make another record like West End Girls? So you don't. You do something totally different. And you never get sick of it. It's got such a strong mood that you can still kind of feel. I've never got bored of having to sing it.
My name's Tim Burgess, and I'm a fan of the Pet Shop Boys. I first heard them when they first came out, so West End Girls was the first track that I heard on the radio and saw on the television, and I just thought that they were fantastic. I thought that the melodies were great, and it was minimal fuss but brand new sounding pop music.
I really liked them because they were this kind of dark, sardonic take on what was happening around them.
Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should.
The songs really spoke to me because it was really the atmosphere of London at the time. You know, there was this underbelly, this underculture of coolness, but it was also quite dark.
Visually, they seem to relate with videos, etc., a lot about the city and lights and culture. They seem to be the two characters who are walking from club to gallery to street to disco and just observing what was going on. As a teenager around London at that time, I would be doing the same thing, walking from place to place, thinking, what is this? What is this world? What is going on? Why is everyone rushing everywhere? You know, it's very much that feeling of being a teenager.
If I made you feel second best, I'm so sorry I was blind. You were always on my mind.
I like the way in which they often take classic songs and do cover versions which have their own unique, often very uplifting, energizing, hopeful, inspiring take.
Here's Tim Rice-Oxley from the band Keane.
The first thing I heard by the Pet Shop Boys was Always on My Mind when it was on Now 11. And a friend of mine played it to me and I absolutely loved it. I had to listen to it over and over again. Just the energy of it that first appealed to me. And it's that sort of driving, propulsive, exciting thing that they did so well on so many of those tracks, and they still do. But then as I listened more to their stuff, I realised there was that very emotional quality to their music as well. And these bold, kind of almost classical melodies, very 60s influenced melodies, I think, looking back now. And these very sort of mournful lyrics, very English settings, seemed very familiar and very relatable and very powerful. So I loved that energy combined with the emotion, and I still love it today.
I actually remember reading in Smash Hits, I was probably only 10 or 11, that the editor, I think, was leaving Smash Hits because he was focusing full-time on his band, Pet Shop Boys. So I was sort of familiar with Neil Tennant as a writer, even as a kid of 9, 10, 11, because I had a real passion for pop music. So I was already sort of engaged in thinking, well, what's his band going to be like?
All of a sudden there was lots of things mentioned in magazines that I read about Neil being a former journalist and all that kind of stuff, which I found kind of interesting too.
They were just suddenly just blown up everywhere. This new band, one of them was a journalist, which seemed to be a big deal at the time. And also they were doing things slightly differently.
All day, all day.
It was like completely electronic. And it was around at that time that started to come out. You know, a lot of bands were swapping over, getting out of the punk thing and getting into a more electronic sound, which was very fresh and very new at the time and just something completely different.
The music, the rhythm, the style and everything was captivating.
It goes from the song that there's a very defined character of Neil's delivery and his words. Obviously, there's a very defined character of who they are, Neil and Chris, visually. Chris would stand there and look like he was hardly touching a keyboard and say nothing. It was just beautifully thought out and really clever. It's really intriguing, really enigmatic. It made you reach in and say, what's going on?
I just really liked the concept of it being a two-piece. I really liked the way that they were. There was like a quiet one and someone who spoke, and you know, less is more.
Here's Martin Fry from ABC.
ABC formed a little earlier than the Pet Shop Boys, but I do remember running into Neil and Chris on the set of Top of the Pops, and It's a Sin was number one, yeah. And I think it would be around about the mid-80s. We had a record called When Smokey Sings on the charts, but I was fully aware of them from day one, from Clubland. Mark White would go to heaven and hear their music. I'd hear their stuff out in the clubs, in the Hacienda. I really loved the way the Pet Shop Boys, it's an obvious thing to say, but Neil and Chris, they've managed to kind of marry those two worlds, club music and beautiful melodies.
All great music and all great art is defined by character and personality, and it's defined by why it's different.
When you look around, you wonder, do you play to win, or are you just a bad loser?
And often it's not different from anything that's happened before, it just happens to be different in its own world where it exists. And Pet Shop Boys were very different in the world that was inhabited at the time, particularly when West End Girls came out. There was nothing really like it. So obviously you can talk about Neil Tennant's delivery. He doesn't use much vibrato in his voice. He's not trying to technically try and what can we say? It wasn't Luther Vandross at that time, you know, and nobody else sounds like him, and there's no better place to be as a singer. You know, as a vocalist, you can try as hard as you like and do as many vocal lessons and learn your craft and all those kind of things to try and do things as you're supposed to do them, but there's no greater thing than just sounding like nobody else apart from you.
Well, I first sang in public. I was in a folk group in Newcastle. Well, the songs were a little bit rocky, actually, but I did used to sing in an American accent. When I first performed the West End Girls rap, I did it in an American accent. Sometimes you're better off dead, there's a gun in your hand. But when we recorded it in New York, I deliberately thought, no, I'm going to do this in an English accent because we are Brits here in New York, and I think I should do it like that. And after that, I never did anything in an American accent. Frank Sinatra always used to say that you should sing like you speak, you should phrase things conversationally. And I took that on board. And so therefore, again, I do it in my own voice, in my natural accent. I don't put a voice on. Some singers put voices on to sing because it helps them, but I've always done my voice.
He's instantly recognisable. And of course, that's just the tone and delivery. And the lyrical content just feels like he's able to identify without preaching about ordinary life, just throwing out images and ideas. And I love lyrics that don't try and tell me what to think about the lyric. They tell me to do what you want with them, you know, ask you to make up your own mind and make up your own narrative about them.
Pop is considered to be a basic form of music. Now, Pet Shop Boys obviously had that element, but also very intriguing and intellectual lyrics. I guess hooks that took you somewhere else as well, but the basic format is pop, which is basically a basic format, and so is punk. And I always liked that to build on as a form of music. It like gets you straight away And then you start to figure out that it's not as easy as it first appears.
Come on, esa vida, hey, that's the way life is, that's the way life is.
You know, and I think that's one of the most amazing things about pop music is that it's basic, it has that format, but it's not as easy as you think to achieve. I would absolutely apply those. I mean, when you hear a song like Being Boring or West End Girls or Say Vida, That's the Way Love Is. I mean, these songs are just like so instantly appealing, but yet you end up listening to them hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times and they never get boring.
They were a pop group. Like, everything they did just seemed to be, you know, hugely successful instantly. They just seemed to be straight, which wasn't like the groups I was listening to at the time. It was something about it. They just weren't so in the mainstream. Pet Shop Boys were instantly in the mainstream. But of course, their music was incredibly intelligent and potent lyrically. It connected across the board to the wider public in a way that lots of the other music I was listening to didn't. They seemed to instantly playing huge shows and doing big awards and things, you know. It was that kind of pop crew. They were so huge instantly.
You're listening to the Pet Shop Boys, A Celebration, with me, Matt Lucas, on Absolute Radio. It's time for a quick break, but we'll continue with this tribute to the Pet Shop Boys very soon.
Pet Shop Boys, A Celebration.
Absolute Radio Stories, the real history of real music.
Absolute Radio Stories.
Absolute Radio Stories.
Absolute Radio Stories presents Pet Shop Boys, A Celebration.
Welcome back to the Pet Shop Boys, A Celebration, with me, Matt Lucas, on Absolute Radio. This is part 2. I believe we can change. We can make it more than a dream. And I believe we can change. It's not as strange as it might seem. More Than a Dream, 2009. Before the break, we heard from a host of well-known Pet Shop Boys fans who told us how the duo caught their attention and why they appealed to them all those years ago. Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe famously met in a hi-fi shop on the King's Road in Chelsea back in 1981. But what do they remember of this chance encounter?
You remember Chris was chatty.
Hard to believe, isn't it?
The guy in the shop wasn't behind the counter because he was welding my lead for me. And you could smell the welding in the shop. I was very proud of that. I bought a synthesizer. This was the future of music, remember, in 1981. And I knew nothing about it. And I discovered that Chris was a keyboard player, as well as being a trombone player. And we met up several days later, because we lived around the corner from each other, which is probably why we were also in the same shop. That was when we went back to my flat and started figuring out the synthesizer. Now I had a guitar.
Neil played me a few of his early demos. I thought they were quite good, actually. There was always a good bit in them, a sort of clever bit. So I thought, he's obviously got a bit of talent.
A bit of talent.
Bit of talent.
He needs a good keyboard player.
And thankfully for us, this all led to the Pet Shop Boys and 40 years of success. They've since had 22 top 10 hits in the UK alone. Here's human rights campaigner and Pet Shop Boys fan, Peter Tatchell.
From 1984, the Pet Shop Boys had a succession of hit after hit after hit. West End Girls, Go West, Always on My Mind, Let's Make Lots of Money, What Have I Done to Deserve This, It's a Sin. It's just a catalogue of great, great music. And that music stands the test of time.
I remember being on the school coach, and if we were lucky, we had a driver who played pop music on the radio. If we were unlucky, we had a driver who played politicians talking on Radio 4. But we were lucky, and Suburbia came on the radio. I would have been about 12 years old. I loved the melody of it, but also I grew up in Suburbia, and I marvelled at the way they could take something that felt a bit dull and make it sound exciting. This is ABC's Martin Fry.
I think one of the reasons they're durable is the lyrics, definitely, from, Left to My Own Devices, Rent. Everybody has a favourite Pet Shop Boys song, and it's in the lyrics. It's a cliche to say this, but it's a soundtrack to people's lives. And I think that's why people love to go and see them in arenas and stadiums today in 2024.
You dress me up, I'm your puppet. You buy me things, I love it.
This is musician Bernard Butler.
In the 80s, there was a real movement of alternative music that seemed to sort of love its own underground status, its cult status. As a kid, this frustrated me. I felt like groups like The Smiths, they were writing beautiful, euphoric pop music that should be everywhere. And I was like, why am I having to listen to dreadful music on the radio when the music I want to play was just in this snobbish little world? It's very much how it was. And so I always wanted to make pop music that connected to people. And so Pet Shop Boys did that. They took intelligent ideas of culture and of everything around them and brought them into the spotlight for the mainstream.
I also love Rent. I love the lyrics. There's a melancholy about that song. I've never really heard the things talked about in Rent, talked about in a song before. Not that way.
Left to My Own Devices is my favourite Pet Shop Boys song, yeah. Round about that time they were working, I think, with Trevor Horn and with Ann Dudley, who I work with. And, Left to My Own Devices is one of those kind of open-ended songs. I still don't really know exactly what it's about all these years on.
I get out of bed at 10:30, phone up a friend who's a party animal.
As a young person, doing my 10,000 hours as a teenager where you absorb everything, what I really was fascinated by was the arrangements and the structures, the way they were layered and the way songs built during their journey. And I really loved the arrangements, so the ambition of the arrangements.
Left to my own devices, I probably would.
Left to My Own Devices, I guess, is the most obvious one, where it was just instantly fascinating. This big orchestra that starts the song. I just was so intrigued by it that they could put that against a disco beat. So Che Guevara and Debussy to a disco beat, as they say, but it felt literally like that.
Che Guevara and Debussy to a disco beat.
So exhilarating. I found it funny. I found his words funny. But most of all, it's pop music. That's what I love about it. The reason why they seem to have a passion for connecting to people, to the mainstream, to the world, for nothing to be hidden under.
Here's Tim Rice-Oxley from the band Keane.
It's so hard to pick one song that I love above all the others. I mean, Always on My Mind was a huge moment in my life. I still feel the excitement of now because it changed my life. It got me into music and then songwriting, and then, it changed the shape of my life. But I think as a fan and a songwriter myself, the one I would choose would be Being Boring.
I came across a cache of photos and invitations to teenage parties.
It just is on another level. It's almost not a pop song, it's a work of art on a operatic scale. When it first came out, I would have been 15, I think, and I loved it, but I didn't really understand it at the time. And I think as time has gone by, the depth of it kind of hits harder with every year.
'Cause we were never being boring. We had too much time to find for ourselves.
The imagery, the massive sense of time passing, the massive sense of loss, and the frantic joy of being young, and the glamour and the hope and the dreams and the beauty and the innocence, and then, set in the context of time passing and aging and those things slipping away and how you feel differently as the decades pass by. I mean, it's a lot to encompass in one pop song, and it's an absolute piece of genius for the ages.
I would never find myself feeling bored. 'Cause we were never being boring.
Then you have these one-word album titles were always just so distinct, and the visuals of the artwork, the way they presented themselves, the sleeves and the videos, but just this entire world that seemed to go together, and it was like nobody else, and it felt like only the Pet Shop Boys can call their album Please and the next album Actually. It was just such a clever, simple idea, and it just felt like it was intriguing what the next episode would be like.
In spite of dreams, you'd be sitting somewhere here with me.
My human rights work is very intense and often very stressful. I'm sometimes dealing with life and death situations. So for me to be able to switch off and listen to some, energizing, uplifting, hopeful music, or like the Pet Shop Boys produce, that's been a great release. And there's been many a time when I've been very highly stressed and needed to chill out, and that's when I've gone and listened to Pet Shop Boys music. I think my favorite is probably Go West, a cover version, but full of energy, uplifting, hopeful. The lyrics are all about, searching out and going for a better life.
We will go our way. Together. We will leave someday.
And of course, it was originally written for the village people, and Go West was to go to San Francisco. This was the 1970s, when San Francisco was a gay mecca and utopia for gay people, where there was much greater freedom and opportunity than in many other places. So that song, for me, captures the idea that we can all find something better. We can go to a better place. In many ways, the song is an allegory, I suppose, for LGBT plus people coming out and finding solace in a new place. Perhaps escaping a homophobic hometown to win freedom in a more liberal, progressive city where there's greater freedom and opportunity.
We will learn and teach. Together. Change our pace of life. Together. We will work and strive.
A lot of LGBT plus people can relate to the Pet Shop Boys because their music and their lyrics often speak about the queer experience, about problems and complexities of relationships. So you take songs like Always on My Mind, What Have I Done to Deserve This, and It's a Sin. Those songs and many others talk about issues like regrets in relationships, longing to fix them, dysfunctional relationships, and not having the strength to walk away, and being made to feel that being LGBT plus is sinful and shameful. We can all, as LGBT plus people, relate to that.
As Peter Tatchell just said, and as demonstrated by the song Go West and many others, the music of the Pet Shop Boys has been so important to the LGBTQ+ community. This is Skin from the rock band Skunk Anansie.
I think they're still relevant now because they spoke about gay culture in a way that we understood. They managed to speak about all these things in a way that was secret and commercial, and really the root of it was just excellent songwriting.
When I look back upon my life, it's always with a sense of shame.
So it was all the messages, and we kind of got the double meaning of some of the songs as well, because it was about our gay culture and our life and our friends. And I think it's only now that a lot of people are kind of harking back to that and realising what they were talking about, what It's a Sin was really about.
It's a sin.
But now when you look back on it, there was so much intelligence, and they found a way to talk about those issues that could relate to us, that could also relate to someone who's completely unconnected to the life that they were living, the life that we were all living.
A lot of the Pet Shop Boys music is gender neutral. It doesn't specify male or female, so it's open to both LGBT plus and straight people to identify with and embrace.
It was very hard to be gay back in those days. You know, you couldn't talk about gay issues. You know, you couldn't talk about gay subjects. And there they were, just out there doing it barefaced, but actually at the same time doing it in a very intellectual and intelligent way.
The first time I saw them must have been 89, something like that. And it was at the Birmingham NEC. And what I remember really, really clearly about it is there was this big, long intro to It's a Sin. And then I remember Neil arriving on stage, being carried, dressed as the Pope, being carried by altar boys, and he's on a throne, sitting on this chair in the air. I've still got the image of it in my head. And him being carried on and singing It's a Sin like that. I'll never forget that. I just thought, just absolutely blew my mind. As a Catholic boy as well, it was just hugely impressive for somebody to write an incredible pop song, and It's Sin was a huge, huge hit that was absolutely scathing about the Catholic Church. I came from a very, very strict Catholic background, which made me completely cynical towards the whole thing. It gave me the freedom, it made me feel okay about questioning it. Things that other artists might talk about, issues like that, but in a very sort of dramatic and preachy way, which is sort of missing the point. And Neil is quietly devastating. It's this quietly devastating, just laying everything out, not trying to be too soulful with his delivery, but absolutely emotional and from the heart. It's so beautiful and intimate the way he expresses things. I love the way he expresses words very clearly and very articulately and very deliberately without having to shout at you. So yeah, it was a great way of connecting with me, yeah.
Neil Tennant, in the early days, never confirmed or denied that he was gay. He didn't finally come out to 1994, but that was still a very important coming out because he was a big star. And so he gave young LGBT plus people a gay icon to look up to, and he also helped break down the music industry closet.
It was a long time, if I remember rightly, before Neil came out and talked about his sexuality, but it seemed like something that was known about them, and they were very vocal in support of gay rights, and it was obviously a big part of their music. But I remember being kind of mocked at school for listening to the Pet Shop Boys and listening to a gay band, you know, which seems unbelievable now.
I brought you drinks, I brought you flowers, I read your books and talked for hours. Every day so many drinks, such pretty flowers. So tell me, what have I done to deserve this?
But I think that they brought a huge amount to British music in that respect as well. And, you know, in a way that's probably the most important thing of all, because they were such leaders in that respect. And I think they've been so inspirational and iconic in that respect to other artists that have come after them.
Here's the Charlatans frontman, Tim Burgess.
I would say that they're very English, and I think that they, you know, on many levels are proud of that, and I think that they have moved mountains in the subculture. I think they've played the game, and I think they've perverted us all in many ways, and I think that they probably laugh at a lot of the things that they've done because we've all fell for it. Everything that they've done has been fun, direct, pompous and silly, you know, and it's hard to pull all that off. It's impossible, you know.
Now you look back onto it and you realise the atmosphere that they were writing these songs in, and how difficult it was, and how much negativity they were getting, and how much all the stuff they had to go through. But the songs were so good that it rose above all of that ignorance, you know, and people are still realising now that those songs are really important in terms of they're anthems to our lives and anthems to gay culture at the time, and that has stayed significant from then till now.
Neil's coming out encouraged and empowered others in the music industry to follow suit, because his career did not nosedive and showed that being open about your sexuality wasn't a career-ending move.
It's time for another break, but in the final part of the Pet Shop Boys, A Celebration, we'll hear what it's like to work with the duo and talk further about the legacy of the band.
Pet Shop Boys, A Celebration with Matt Lucas.
Absolute Radio Stories, the real history of real music.
Hear more Absolute Radio Stories on the free Rayo app, available now in your app store. Absolute Radio Stories.
Absolute Radio Stories.
Absolute Radio Stories presents Pet Shop Boys, A Celebration.
Must I, Neil Tennant, spend the rest of my days in this pet shop?
I'm Matt Lucas, and this is the Pet Shop Boys, A Celebration on Absolute Radio.
Hit it, Chris. We have become Pet Shop Boys.
This is part 3. I don't like much, really, do I? But what I do like, I love passionately. Paninaro, 1986. I first met Neil and Chris in a quite a strange episode. I'd gone with David Walliams to a taping of Top of the Pops, where they were singing, or rather miming, to their song Liberation. And this must have been 1993 or 1994. The crowd at Top of the Pops were a bunch of very cool-looking teenagers, and me and David dressed quite strangely. David knew every word, and we just caught their eye, and we spoke to them afterwards. Then one day, actually not that long after that, I was in a place called the Groucho Club in London with Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer, who I was working with at the time. And I got talking to Chris about Arsenal, mainly, and we spent an evening talking about football. From that, we became friends, and we were very, very flattered and excited when Neil and Chris asked us to be in the video for I'm With Stupid. We just had a real laugh. They have a poker face on stage, but off stage, they're quite relaxed. So it makes me laugh when I see them on stage looking so serious. Bernard Butler recorded the song Burning the Heather with Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe in 2019.
I'd met Neil and Chris before a few times, and this is the first time I'd actually recorded with them. And I just felt like, as a fan, that I thought, oh, this is cool. I'm getting to listen to the new Pet Shop Boys record before anyone else. You know, because they'd send me a couple of songs and in advance. And I was like, this didn't happen when I was 15.
You've got me all wrong.
You know, you'd have to wait like everybody else. So I was really intrigued and really excited by it. And in advance of that situation, you feel an awful lot of positivity towards what they're doing because you're already a fan and you feel like, well, it's going to be good. It's the Pet Shop Boys. And then from my involvement with it, you have to just be aware that these are very intelligent, articulate musicians. They haven't got this far by not doing everything with absolute meticulous level of thought and guidance. It's a real thrill, but you can't be sort of overawed or anything. You know, at the same time, you just want to go and not mess it up. It's like, this could be a record that I was listening to when I was a kid. You know, don't just go and do something stupid, you know, just be good, do your thing. It's a joy that the musicians who you really love also have come to respect you enough to invite you to be part of what they do. Obviously, it's a complete joy, but everything that I love about music is about being thrown into as many situations as possible throughout my life where they're different. And I feel with the Pet Shop Boys, when I look at people they've collaborated, for example, Dusty Springfield, or things that they've moved their way through, it just feel like, wow, another beautiful idea and another brilliant idea, and challenging themselves all the time. So when you're thrown into that, you just feel like in the same way, like this is what it's supposed to be like, you know, being a musician.
I set out in the dark, waking from a nightmare, hoping I could find the middle of nowhere. I'm a stranger in this town.
When we were recording that track, it was just really good fun. Neil's very, very astute, and I think Chris was asleep for most of the time and on the sofa and playing the role of being Chris Lowe like no one else, until he heard something he didn't like and then said, don't do that. It was a real joy, and it's pretty cool to be on a Pet Shop Boys record.
You've got me all wrong.
For more than 40 years, the Pet Shop Boys have been inspiring artists, just like the Charlatans' Tim Burgess.
I actually bought Behaviour, and before that I think I was just a fan of the singles, but Behaviour was an album. It was quite interesting. It's a very beautifully packaged album. Johnny Marr played on it. I'm pretty sure that already Neil had sang on a record called Getting Away With It by Electronic. So that kind of sealed lots of deals for me, that they were all friends. Pet Shop Boys, Johnny, Bernard, and I kind of just like that whole thing. And I have to give props to Neil's voice, really. And a song by Electronic, Disappointed, is a song that I played through some of my toughest times for me emotionally. I've played that song about 1,000 times. That's pretty much because I love Neil's voice so much.
This time I've got someone who won't leave me feeling disappointed once more. Disillusions, oh come on.
I really resonated with a song called Opportunities.
I've got the brains, you've got the looks, makes me lots of money.
So much so that I used the title for one of the Charlatans songs in 1990. It's hard to talk about another artist. I hope he doesn't hate this, but it's kind of a deadpan kind of delivery, matter of fact, kind of like said in an authoritative way from a place of absolute knowing. And that is something that I always felt was achievable for me, and also I like that state that it puts me in when I kind of think about Neil when I'm singing.
Choose the perfect time. If you've got the inclination, I have got the crime.
Keane's Tim Rice-Oxley is another musician who credits the Pet Shop Boys with inspiring his music.
I'd say Keane have been massively influenced by the Pet Shop Boys. I think you can really hear it on songs like Everybody's Changing. And Sovereign Light Cafe.
Let's go down to the rides on East Parade by the lights of the Palace Arcade and watch.
You know, there's kind of driving bass lines, almost slightly sort of disco-y, I suppose. That energy, I think, is something that I feel I'm always kind of seeking after, which probably dates back to kind of first hearing Always on My Mind and Heart and tracks like that. But then also I think, those amazing atmospheric songs like It Couldn't Happen Here. Had real impact on me emotionally, and I think that's something we're always striving for as well. And you can hear it in, I don't know, On a Day Like Today. Untitled One. probably a whole load of our songs have been influenced, musically in that way, and then also lyrically, the very sort of English, small town, everyday characters and experiences that I think have had a huge influence on my writing and on our music.
In recent years, the music of the Pet Shop Boys has reached new generations and resonated amongst modern audiences. They have soundtracked critically acclaimed entertainment, like the 2023 film All of Us Strangers, starring Andrew Scott, as well as inspiring the title of Russell T Davies' 2021 TV series, It's a Sin. So why are they still appealing? Here's human rights campaigner and friend of the band, Peter Tatchell.
I think the Pet Shop Boys style of music has a universal and classic appeal. It's never going to go out of fashion. It's a style of music that speaks to generation after generation. And that is why they've had 4 decades of success, which is pretty extraordinary. I think they've sold over 50 million records. That's an astonishing achievement.
This is Skin from the band Skunk Anansie.
They're just great songs at the end of the day, but underneath it all, there's layers to it, which makes it sustain the decades. They're not just silly throwaway pop songs. They have relevance. They have meaning to every generation that's gone since. They are messages, and they're topics about what life is like and what life used to be like.
I think because they set themselves up as modern from the start, they were interested in being modern. It's a difference between trying to describe the future and trying to live in the present. And I felt that they would always try and reflect the modernity that was in contemporary life. And lots of people, when they try and be what you'd call modern, you're always going to fail if you try and be or look like or sound like the future, But they've always tried to be modern within the context of where they are. Nothing actually sounds dated. You hear dreadful 80s records that sound horrible now and think, oh God, why do people do that? But it just doesn't sound dated at all. So it's kind of incredible, really. So I put it down to that. They've always just had a focus on living in the world they are. They just seem to drift around the modern world, the present day, describing what's happening without trying to shove it down your throat.
What is the legacy of the Pet Shop Boys? They just make really, really great pop music. They write catchy songs, they have witty lyrics, they don't sound like anyone else. I don't know a vocalist who sounds anything like Neil.
Gosh, those songs are just as relevant now as they used to be, because we're still dealing with the same levels of ignorance and we're still dealing with huge levels of homophobia. And I think that's why they're so relevant, because the messages are still the same. So bands that are fighting that and bands that are trying to move gay culture on and trying to help us be accepted. But on from that, the root of it is the songs are just amazing. Well written, well crafted, great melodies, great choruses, very, very singable, with a lot of depth.
They've been going for more than 4 decades, which is an extraordinary musical achievement, an incredible period of longevity. I think they are in the record books as being the most successful pop duo in British music history, which is quite an achievement, and I think much deserved. Their music and lyrics are timeless. They're singing about issues that are relevant generation after generation. And the music that goes with it is so great.
Here's ABC's Martin Fry.
The Pet Shop Boys are always about immaculate conception, brilliant tracks, great lyrics, obviously. Neil and Chris seem to have a fantastic relationship which has stood the test of time. I don't know what it's like to be a Pet Shop Boy, but the impression you get as a fan is that there's some good chemistry there. And I think that is reflected in every record they've made, from West End Girls day one onwards, Bobby O Productions, to the present day. The Pet Shop Boys have created their own like genre, really. They really did represent dance music.
They've been a huge influence on British music over the last 40 years. I mean, for me, a huge thing that they brought was this combination of intelligence and commercial impact. To me, that seemed like a very rare thing, to be so subtle, so nuanced, so literary, so articulate and original, but all in the context of these songs that you were hearing on the charts and on the radio, and they were everywhere and everyone loved them and they were having these huge hits. So for me, as a teenager, at that moment in time, that was a massive influence, and I think it's something that really changed the way that people felt they were able to write songs at the time. So I think that was a massive thing.
What they have is a bunch of amazing songs, and as soon as you hear them, you know they're by the Pet Shop Boys. They're unmistakable. And that's all you really want, I think, as an artist, is to create something that people know immediately is yours.
They open the door for people to have a platform to say things that aren't incredibly banal, to be intelligent and to be emotional at the same time, but always knowing that you're reaching the mainstream and you have the possibility. It's as simple as that, being able to be intelligent and articulate and be excited by the culture of the world we live in and put it in front of people, not feeling that commerciality equals banality.
The songs, the subject matter, the fact that they can appeal to everybody, I mean, that's so rare. I mean, they appeal to a core audience, they appeal to a broad audience. It's mass appeal, basically.
The Pet Shop Boys are musical icons. They have a legacy stretching back over 4 decades. They have, in many instances, broken boundaries, set the tone, and paved the way for others to follow.
Here are the Pet Shop Boys, Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe, one final time.
It's funny, isn't it, fate, really? How chance encounters can send your life spiralling off in a completely different direction. It's weird, isn't it? I dread to think, because I wouldn't want the responsibility of being an architect. You'd have probably been a successful magazine editor.
I did be. This was before I was a journalist.
I mean, Neil's very employable, highly employable. You wouldn't want me in your company. I could sleep half the time.
Nobody can live without love.
Not long after that, I got the job at Smash Hits. I was a book editor, you know. I don't know, I'd probably gone and worked for Q magazine, and I think I'd probably be a freelance journalist. I don't know, who knows? Something else might have happened. I mean, if we hadn't gone into the electrical shop on the King's Road, we wouldn't be sitting here now.
I'm Matt Lucas, and this has been the Pet Shop Boys, a celebration on Absolute Radio. I'll leave you with a fitting quote from the band's 2009 song, Legacy. That's it, the end. But you'll get over it, my friend. Thanks for listening.